Live from BCTV, here are tonight's top stories.
The police and the Premier. The Mounties search Glen Clark's home. Here we go again. Another storm rakes southwestern BC. Teenagers pledging celibacy and putting it in writing.
Right now, the News Hour with Tony Parsons.
Good evening. It's been an astounding day in BC's halls of power, and it all began with this unprecedented image captured exclusively by BCTV cameras last night. A team of RCMP investigators climbing the front steps of Premier Glen Clark's home.
It's the RCMP.
They are armed with a search warrant, and after a few seconds, the door opens and the Premier's wife lets them in. Sometime later, the Premier himself arrives with his communications officer in tow as the police search moves through his house. News of the raid on Premier Clark's house rocketed right across the country today with little or no information to go with it. What exactly were police looking for? The search warrant is sealed and its contents remain secret. But late today, police said that warrant did not allege any criminal activity on the part of the Premier. As you probably know, the search followed a raid on a Burnaby hotel where police said illegal gambling was taking place, and where the BC government had granted the owner approval in principle of a charity casino. Until late today, the Premier himself was silent. Then he had this to say.
I am very troubled by yesterday's events, as is my family in particular. Out of my respect and concern for the integrity of the legal process, I'm obliged to limit my comments on this matter. As many of you know, I would much rather take questions and talk at length on the subject, but at the moment I cannot. As you may be aware, Dimitri Pillarinos was involved in an application for a casino license in Burnaby. He is a neighbor of mine. We see each other occasionally. Our children attend the same school and they play together. As a result, I gave explicit instructions to my staff last summer to ensure that I was insulated from the decision-making process for this license application. I am sharing with you a copy of the memorandum to file prepared by my staff confirming this fact. As a result, I am very confident that I have conducted myself entirely appropriately. My staff and government officials have been directed to cooperate immediately with the police so this matter can be resolved expeditiously, and I truly believe it will be. Thank you.
There are many new developments to report in our continuing investigation of this story, and here's what's ahead. We'll show you in greater detail what happened during the visit by police to the Premier's home. You'll hear the complaints that the News Hour was somehow in collusion with police in that raid. You'll see the other raid at the alleged gambling establishment and exactly how, according to police, it could have made millions. And you'll see how a cabinet approval in principle for a charity casino license could tie so much of this story together. First, the search of the Premier's home, and keep in mind that this followed a police raid at a Burnaby hotel where a key figure was charged with running a common gaming house. As it happens, that same man lives in the Premier's neighborhood, and documents reveal he had done renovation work on the Premier's home. Also keep in mind that there is still no indication of wrongdoing on behalf of the Premier. All that can be said for sure is there is a police investigation and they do have a warrant.
7 p.m. The lights in the Premier's home have just come on, and 3 commercial crime section investigators move in. They've been waiting more than an hour.
It's the RCMP.
The police, who had spotted us, treat the search warrant execution by the book.
Hi there.
Hi.
We'll come in and talk to you, please.
There's 3 from the RCMP and 2 media behind us. You could just the RCMP come in, please.
Sure.
Thanks.
The police go in, and an hour later, Premier Clark arrives at the rear of his home, accompanied by his Director of Communications. Using their search warrant, the police are investigating the government's approval of a gambling license for the North Burnaby Inn, where a raid on an alleged illegal gambling club took place hours earlier. One of those arrested and charged in connection with this raid is a friend of the Premier. In fact, he renovated Glen Clark's rear deck. The building permit identifies him as Dimitrios Pillarines, likely a typo. His real name is Pillarinos. It appears next to the Premier's name. The Premier would not discuss the search last night, and the police, who were surprised that we were there, said nothing too.
Tell us what you're doing in there, sir.
No, I can't.
Tell us what department of the RCMP you're with.
No, sir, I can't.
Can't? Are you taking any exhibits?
Of course, the Premier is now saying that he believes he will be exonerated by the Mounties investigation, but he says he is not able to answer any questions about it for the media, for the public at this time.
John, the way you ended up witnessing the search of the Premier's house is now being criticized in some quarters, suggesting that the NewsHour was acting in collusion with police. Tell us about that.
Yes, Tony, I can tell you that today, in fact, this came up in the House of Commons. Burnaby MP Sven Robinson raised it in the House of Commons, and he repeated his allegations outside for our cameras.
When 3 RCMP officers show up on the Premier's doorstep, accompanied by 2 BCTV journalists, the obvious conclusion is that, in fact, the RCMP tipped off BCTV and that that's why they were there.
Okay, I'm told by Mr. Daly, John Daly, that he acted on a hunch and staked out the Premier's residence.
Well, look, I think there's got to be a full independent inquiry into the circumstances here. I think that the obvious conclusion is that it is simply incredible, literally incredible, to believe that BCTV journalists just happened to be around Glen Clark's home at the time that the RCMP showed up to execute a search warrant. I frankly find that literally incredible.
Now, in fact, it turned out that we weren't tipped off at all. What happened was we were aware that the police had arrested Mr. Dimitrios Pellerinos at a different location, and because of that we suspected that the police were doing search warrants, executing search warrants at other places. We couldn't find out anything about that. I talked to a few people not in the police department, and they said, well, we know that some of the applicants for these gaming licenses are concerned about the connections between the Premier and one of the applicants. Perhaps you should check his constituency office and check his residence. We did that. We went there, and frankly, we got lucky, and it paid off. Tony?
All right, John, thank you very much. Now, the police raid that started the whole ball rolling yesterday afternoon. It happened at a hotel called the North Burnaby Inn, and it kept a police investigation that lasted several months. Our Don Roberts now on the allegations of illegal gambling and how police say it all worked.
It's some of the evidence the RCMP seized from Tuesday's raid on the Lumbermen's Social Club. Police say the 24-hour-a-day operation stood to make millions, and all patrons had to do to take part in the alleged illegal action was become a member.
Individuals who are interested in playing poker would join the club, become a member, which simply consisted of attending the club and filling out a membership and presenting identification. From there on, my understanding is persons were free to participate in poker games.
Police say the house rules were posted on the walls and were common for the game. And under these rules, the 4 poker tables at the Lumbermen's Club would each see about 30 to 35 hands an hour. And the house would receive between $2 to $4 a hand.
We've seized approximately $40,000 cash that we know of at this time. There's also a safe seize that we have not yet been able to open, and there's an undetermined amount of cash in there.
And where has that money now gone?
A large portion of that money has gone to our proceeds of crime section down in Vancouver.
Police say the raid was the result of a 5-month investigation after a number of complaints were made to police. 2 undercover officers began visiting the club on January 14th and returned on 12 separate dates. And when enough evidence was gained, the warrant was issued for the Lumbermen's Club.
How was the raid yesterday linked to the raid at Mr. Clark's house?
2 completely separate investigations. Our office, our criminal investigation section, was conducting an investigation into illegal gambling operations at the North Burnaby Inn, and the Vancouver RCMP commercial crime section was conducting an investigation in regards to an application for a casino license at the North Burnaby Inn.
Simply a coincidence?
2 totally separate investigations. They started independently. The investigators from both units became aware of the other investigation. However, they continued their investigation independently.
As for those arrested during the raid at the North Burnaby Inn, police say 7 of them have been charged with keeping a common gaming house, and 2 have been charged with engaging in bookmaking. The manager of the club, 34-year-old Dimitrios Pellerinos, was arrested at a separate location and charged with 1 count of keeping a common gaming house. He is scheduled to appear in court on March 30th.
There was no possibility that the city of Burnaby would allow a legal casino in the Hastings Street Hotel that was raided yesterday. But despite that, Cabinet went ahead and gave approval in principle to a license for the hotel operators. And everyone is wondering why, including members of Burnaby Council. Clem Chappell has that aspect of the story.
A charitable casino at this location on East Hastings was never going to happen, a fact which the provincial government should have figured out long before it granted a casino license in principle for that location.
We wrote to the government and told the government that we absolutely would not consider a casino at the North Burnaby Inn site, and made it perfectly clear that that was not an available option.
A letter confirming this was sent to the minister in charge of gaming way back in August. Again, Mr. Farnworth wrote Mayor Doug Drummond, "I wish to reiterate that Burnaby Council does not support a charitable gaming facility adjacent the North Burnaby Inn." Further back, in March 1997, new government policy stated casinos must have demonstrable local government support. Then in August 1998, Burnaby rejected the Burnaby Inn Casino. In October, police began an investigation of the inn's non-licensed gambling activities. But despite all this, in December, the government approved the casino application.
Well, it's certainly disappointing. I think that that obviously it shakes the faith of a lot of people out there who have believed in the process being essentially one that had significant integrity. And I'm hoping that in the review of this process, they can discover what might have gone wrong or what else they can do to improve it.
Government gaming officials refused to discuss how the decision was made to approve the license, citing the police investigation into that decision.
Already this week, Victoria has been alive with rumors that Premier Clark was on the way out, that there was a move to have him replaced, perhaps even by recent party convert Gordon Wilson. That is just a rumor, we're told. But our Keith Baldry tells us live now that Premier Clark is hearing plenty tonight from both his advisors and his wife. Keith?
That's right, John. I just got off the phone a few moments ago, as a matter of fact, from some NDP insiders who were able to brief me on just what went on behind closed doors there in that all-day-long meeting between Premier Clark and his advisors. First of all, it is true, Dale Clark, the Premier's wife, is furious about last night's events. She's mad at the media, presumably BCTV. She's upset with the police, and she's upset with the entire situation. And I'm told she may be the one who finally pressures the Premier to step aside in the days ahead if he does decide to resign. Secondly, look for the Premier to embark on a new strategy. I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm told the NDP is going to start searching out so-called independent commentators, so-called journalist watchdogs, and academics who are going to publicly come out in favor of the Premier and say he's an honorable person and that he's getting a bum rap here from the media and the police. And finally, one further point, and this could be very troublesome for the Premier in the days ahead. All along, he said he's exempted himself from any cabinet discussions involving the granting of casino license, particularly this one in question. I've just returned from checking the logbook that marks those exemptions, and in no time does Glen Clark show up as exempting himself from cabinet meetings at a time when casinos were being discussed. So these are questions, and that's a particularly troublesome one for the Premier to answer in the days ahead.
All right, Keith, thanks very much. Okay. To say this is a complicated story is like saying the theory of relativity is a little hard to follow. So here's a brief review of what we know so far. First, police conduct a raid on a Burnaby hotel where they arrest a man and charge him with keeping a common gaming house. That man is a neighbor of the Premier's and has done some renovation work on the Premier's house. He is also part of an application to get a charity casino license for which the BC government has granted approval in principle. The police searched the Premier's house, saying later that the search warrant did not allege any criminal activity on the part of the Premier. Burnaby Council says that it has always opposed the charity casino at the North Burnaby Inn and doesn't understand why the BC Cabinet gave it approval in principle. And the Premier says he is dismayed at the search of his home and was always insulated from the decision-making process in the casino license application.